The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Hooray for Hollywood, where stars are living large, in mansions with their servants and their credit cards in charge, with fame that's fleeting, but the egos never change, where everyone's a genius, except the ones who really arrange. Hooray for Hollywood, where the scandals always sell, where every whispered secret is a new tabloid's tell. Oh, how we adore the endless red carpet galore. Hooray for Hollywood, where less is always more.
Yes, indeedy, less is always more here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network and your favorite movie review podcast, Damn You Hollywood. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting premiere podcast. As I said before, Damn You Hollywood. And here's your host, Robert Winfree. Yay!
Yeah, we're going to be talking about less is more tonight, everybody. And the perils and pitfalls of creative bankruptcy, of, what do you want to say, executive cowardice?
I'm going to go ahead and say this. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The business people are not the creative people. The creative people are not the business people. They went to two different levels of schooling. They had two distinctly different types of schooling. So when Disney, to their credit, had one grand slam mostly after another, from Cinderella to The Lion King, if you're Universal, why wouldn't you start remaking your big hit cartoon IPs like How to Train Your Dragon? It only makes sense. It just makes sense, Robert Winfree. If you have absolutely no creative juices and no integrity, and all you're doing is chasing trends and dollars, why not do what was at one point successful for Disney for a good 10-year stretch? Now,
I didn't
looking
realize
at
George
the last,
Lucas had been put on the board at Universal.
If you're only looking at the last 5 years, you're like, what a terrible idea this is. But the reality is that while they may not have had more hits than misses, their hits were huge. Huge. Y-U-G-E. Huge.
True.
So again, if you're Universal, it just makes sense. I don't fault them for doing their job. Their job is to turn profits and make a return on investment. They are beholden to the stockholders. This movie is the net result of being beholden to your stockholders.
Here's a better idea. I can save you this because you can make money while spending a fraction of what it costs to make this movie. Re-release the original. This is all we're doing. Just re-release it.
You want to tell them what we're talking about tonight, and then we can.
We're talking about How to Train Your Dragon.
How to Train Your Dragon is a 2025 American fantasy adventure film that is a live-action remake of the 2010 animated film, itself loosely based on the 2003 novel by Cressida Cowell.
For the record, very loosely, if you've ever read the original book.
Produced by DreamWorks Animation, the film was co-executive produced, written, and directed by Dean Dubrow. It stars Mason Thames, Nico Parker, Gabrielle Howard, Julian Dennison, Bronwyn James, Harry Trelved, Peter Roosevelt, Nick Frost, Gerard Butler, reprising his role as Stoic the Vast, whom he played in the animated films. Plans for a live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon were announced in February of 2023, with Dubrow returning to write, direct, and produce after previously spearheading the animated film trilogy. John Powell, who also worked on the trilogy, additionally returned to compose the score for the film. Thames and Parker joined the cast by May of 2023, with additional casting announced in January of 2024. Filming began later that month in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and wrapped in May. How to Train Your Dragon premiered at CinemaCon on April 2nd, 2025, and was released in the U.S. by Universal Pictures on June 13th, 2025. The film received generally positive reviews from critics and grossed almost $200 million worldwide. A sequel is scheduled to be released June 11th, 2027, because of course it is.
Well, you got a trilogy, so we're going to get 4 movies, because they're going to split the third one into 2 parts, because that's just what we do.
That is what we do. We chase trends and money and cocaine. So much cocaine.
And all you find is heartbreak, despair, and the cold, wet concrete after a swan dive.
The circle of life.
No.
So my son had an interesting, as he always does, an interesting reaction to this movie. Aside from shoot me now, why do you take me to these things? I hate you, I hate this, I hate life. What is pain? And then he cut his arm. No, just kidding. He did have an interesting reaction to this movie, though. He said, this movie was an advertisement for the forthcoming amusement park ride. Like, they just did Epic Universe, and he was like, this is obviously a commercial for the forthcoming ride at Epic Universe. Which then he went into this rant about how he feels like half the movies we go to are just commercials for future theme park rides. And then he started haranguing me about my sports. No, wait, that was you.
And hang on. His haranguing you about your sports gambling will come later when he asks about father, because he calls you father. Why can't I afford to go to a real college? And instead you're sending me to South Carolina, so I'm a Gamecock.
Because your grandfather somehow found the fountain of fucking youth and won't die. That's why you can't go to college. Anywho. But I thought his level of insight was interesting. The other funny thing that happened was, so I'm watching this movie, and I didn't quite have the reaction to it that I had to Ballerina. Quite like this isn't that level of stupid. But I was having some rather amusing thoughts. Some cheeky thoughts, Robert Winfree, I had while watching this movie. One was, where's the paper mill? Where are all the trees that they needed to cut down for the lumber to create the paper? And where's the mill for milling the paper? Well, how are they creating all of this papyrus in which to write books? Why does he have like a journal that he can scribble in about dragons, but I don't see a paper mill anywhere? And how could they have even had a paper mill when every other day they're being attacked by dragons? Like, in all reality, the village in How to Train Your Dragon would have been fucking feral by this point. Because they can't, their civilization can't evolve. Every time they're in survival mode. Every time they turn around, they're besieged by dragons. So where are we getting all of this industry from that this village talks about? And another thing, Robert Winfree, I thought about was offer a liberal use of the word Viking in this movie. The Vikings, and I understand it's fantasy, and I understand we're living in the days of inclusion, but words mean things.
Suddenly,
and the Vikings were a very specific people. Why?
Yep.
Why did they have to be Vikings? Why couldn't they have been Zulu? Why couldn't they have been Aztec, Mayan? Well, they could have been some variation of Indian. None of these words and all of these words would have meant the same thing. My problem isn't like not enough white people. My problem is the use of the word Viking when you could have used any silly word.
And when you say Viking, and then, and now there's Black Vikings, which is a thing that a bunch of idiots are now claiming is a thing because they want to get published. And here's your Chinese Vikings, because you're a Viking. I'm a Viking. Everyone can be a Viking, Mark. Nothing means anything anymore.
Right. Why couldn't they have been Bolsheviks?
Well, because then we'd be rooting for the dragons.
My point is, you silly thing, like they're called Vikings because they want to use the Viking aesthetic, but they don't want to do the Viking. They don't want to do Viking race. Because then they can't do inclusion.
They could be the Viking experience.
Yeah. And again, if they had just used a fantasy word for their fantasy place where fantasy people exist and they kind of look like Vikings, that would have been fine. But it's like, do you assume your audience is that stupid that they
Yes.
can't follow along with what you're trying to do? You have to actually say Viking and then not. And people listening to this like, oh my god, I can't believe you're making a big deal about this. Again, they could have been Zulu for all I gave a shit with the way you're treating the word. Like, say what you will about the aforementioned George Lucas, or for that matter, J.R.R. Tolkien, or for that matter, Gene Roddenberry. They made up a lot of nonsense words. Have you read Dune? That's nonsense words with almost no vowels. Like,
Yep.
they used to be that sort of thing in fiction, and I watched this and I was like, this is one of those weirdo movies where they want modernity, but they also want ancient aesthetic, but they also want
LA casting.
but they also want fairy tale, but they also want
It's
something
Mark, don't
else
you
that's in
understand?
contrast. And it's like, boy, did you take a lot of weird stuff and throw it into the blender.
Mark, you don't understand. It's deeply important that in these wildly fantastical stories, every human being on Earth can accurately see themselves represented. So that this wildly fantastical story and setting becomes your corner street. And it's just The Wire with dragons.
Yes, in this town, we killing it. We aim to hit a dragon, you heard?
For the record, ladies and gentlemen, this is why the show has its title, because we kind of just look at the broad spectrum of what has become of the movie industry.
Yeah. I'm not angry about this movie. Like, before anyone listening to this is like, oh, here we go again. I'm not angry about this movie. I don't care. I went to see it because I am a slave to the schedule. It's my
Which
one
you
truth.
make.
Yes.
Mark is a slave to himself.
I enjoy talking about movies with Robert mostly. Mostly.
That for the record, the mostly is mutual. That's why it works.
But I'm not. I'm like, I don't hate the idea of this movie. I don't hate the practice of this movie. I don't hate the result of this movie. I'm more just kind of belly aching and this is really the point. So I said all this as we were leaving the theater, because as we learned from last week, I've learned to just not talk to my daughter. I'm learning to not talk to my daughter about anything. But in this particular case,
you are raising a recluse at this point. You're headed that direction.
I'm raising a modern woman, despite my best intentions to do otherwise.
I said what I said. Tomato, tomato.
But we're leaving the movie, and I'm just making jokes. Like, I'm not really complaining about the movie. I dare not actually express an opinion about it. And I think I said as much in the car. Like, I'm not talking about this movie. I have 2 hours to do this. I'm not talking about it with you two anymore. Making no, because I'll start talking about it with Jonas, and then Lily starts crying or whatever she does, and it's like, ugh, well, this is a terrible experience. So I'm like, I'll just save it for Robert. Robert gets it all.
That's
so anyway,
kind of our relationship, yes.
But I thought it would be funny, because I'm a funny man, to just be like, where were the paper mills? And what? And I'm doing all this. And there's my daughter holding back tears, going, why do you have to complain about everything? And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm going to stop there before I get myself in trouble in divorce court. So.
We need to figure out at what point, because this was not a problem for you or me. This is not even a problem for us. So I have 3 younger brothers. One's 2 years younger than me. One's 11 or 12. The other's 13, 14 years younger than me. So big gap between the 2 sets of children for my parents. This was not
just know this. When I said this to her, because I was mad at this point, because I'm like, the fuck, I'm not married to you. Why can't I talk around you? And she would, and I'm like, you look like you're about to cry. Like, why does this keep happening? And she goes, I think you're being funny. I'm joking with you. Okay. You can't gaslight me. Go on.
You can't gaslight a gaslighter. That's not how that works. But so my younger 2 brothers did not have this problem. So whatever this is, it happened after their generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
This bizarre assumption of the media you consume as a deeply important part of your personhood. And consequently, any attack or critique is a critique on you as a person. And you must react with like the deepest of emotion and response. And I can only imagine it's because we've lost the ability to connect with each other on some very important levels. So now we just atomize into these bizarre ephemeral webs via the internet of fragile nucleotides around bizarre points of our personality that we rotate through. Like, boy, I sure did like Twilight. And then when you point out that, boy, Twilight's kind of dumb. And here's all the reasons why. The reaction is this pearl clutching, fainting, retiring to the fainting couch.
Well,
Because
it is an interesting thing because it used to be you're just not allowed to talk about the blacks. Now you're just not allowed to talk about the gays. Now you're just not allowed to talk about the women. Fine, we'll just make fun of the fat people. Can we do that? No. Well, what can we talk about? Nothing. Well, what if I talk about movies? No. Well, I want to talk about No.
you're gonna hurt my feelings, Mark.
I said, and the rule is we can't talk about nothing. You hear me? Look, you are to sit down and watch the media and say nothing about it to nobody. I don't even want to hear that you like it. That's too strong.
No, you can't say you like it. You can say you consumed the product and that you're excited for the next product.
I've never quite experienced such overwhelming desire in our culture to throw themselves headlong into George Orwell's 1984. We desperately want to live in the universe of Newspeak.
Yep.
It's incredible. Like, George
It is
Orwell
bizarre.
warned that this thing was going to be oppressed upon us. No one's oppressing anything upon us. We are doing this to ourselves. It's really frightening.
Let me tell you, there's two visions of the dystopian future, fundamentally. These are expressed via two novels. Came out roughly around the same time. One's kind of response to the other. One is the aforementioned 1984 by George Orwell, which is a vision of a jackbooted authoritarian regime. The other, and perhaps more insidious, and it turns out more likely, was Brave New World. And if you've never read Brave New World is about a guy who stops taking the pleasure drug. So the mechanism of control by the people in charge of that one is everything sucks. Here's a drug. This will make you feel good.
Oh, this sounds a lot like Ready Player One.
Sort of, but again, a lot more insidious. And but the point being, Brave New World is not about crushing humanity with force from above. It's about offering them the gilded cage, the soft pillow that they can never escape from, and they will choose that.
It's funny you mentioned that because I talked about this actually with my kids, I think on the way home. I don't remember how we got to the conversation, but I brought up like the concept of happiness and slavery, like, and we talked about this with Bronson, as a matter of fact.
A little bit.
This idea of desiring to be controlled. In my previous therapy session with the couple I was working with, the word dysregulated got thrown around a lot. As in, my emotions are dysregulated.
Yeah.
And I will say this, and then you will go into the plot synopsis. However, did we come upon the greatest plague of the 21st century, the wave of airborne dysregulated emotions?
The greatest plague of the 21st century is the proliferation of therapy speak.
Yeah, I said that too.
I don't mean talk therapy. I mean everyone trying to use therapy speak.
Well, I said to the couple, and then you really do need to get into this. I said the two of you have perfected the art of getting others to perceive you as learned emotionally helpless. And you're both full of shit and it needs to stop. And the guy laughed and said, "You right, you right." And the girl crumbled into a million glassy pieces. And I could see her spirit erupt from the body and scream as it came at me from the library.
Ghostbusters style, yeah.
Yes.
I knew where you were going with that one.
Mm-hmm.
So How to Train Your Dragon is basically it's not just a like sort of remake of the animated movie, it's almost shot for shot in most places.
I asked Lily, like, how close is this to the original? And she's like, almost damn near shot for shot.
So it's been a minute or two since I've seen the first one, but my mom wanted to see this movie with me to kind of pre-screen it for the 5-year-old that is sort of attached to that. That's a whole other thing. 5-year-old kid. And consequently, my mom and my aunt kind of, well, okay, he's about the age when we should start consider taking him to the theater training him, right? So, but you don't take a kid into a blind movie. Like, you as the parent, you should make sure we're cool. So so she wanted to see that, and I said, fine, I'm going to see it because I got to review it. Happy to go with you. Watch the first one. Watch the original, and so you can do the compare and contrast thing. And she did, like literally last night. So when we came out of it, I asked her, because again, it's been a minute or two since I've seen it. I was like, so that felt almost shot for shot, right? And she went, yeah, pretty much. So we're introduced to the Isle of Berk, where the Vikings. I'm convinced.
Vikings.
I'm convinced whoever wrote that only knows Vikings as the football team from Minnesota.
Yeah.
They live here and they are under dragon threat, and there's a vague allusion to, we've gathered clans from around the world, hence the downtown Los Angeles casting call. And we're here to snuff out the dragon scourge, which afflicts the world at large.
Because melatonin and distance from the sun and geographical proximity and the rate at which humanity evolved at different points in different parts of the world matter not.
First of all, melanin, not melatonin, but yes.
You know what I meant.
I do, but I had to correct that for the record. You cannot go down to the grocery store, buy enough melatonin, and become black.
Well, if I try really hard.
So our downtown Los Angeles metropolitan group of people live under dragon threat, and our big hero is Hiccup, who is the lanky, nerdy, erstwhile son of the chief, who is the Vikingest Viking that ever Vikinged from Scotland.
Oh, Scotland doesn't have its own culture. Look, Robert, white people are always Vikings. Black people are always Zulu. Mexicans is always Aztecs. And everybody else is Indian.
I understand what you're doing. I really do. But I have to point out, of all the gross mischaracterizations you just threw,
yes,
the Mexicans as Aztecs is maybe the worst, because the Aztecs were wiped out by the Spaniards, and the local tribes who allied with them against the Aztecs because they were brutal, but they were the indigenous people. Current inhabitants of Mexico, like the entire Latino group of people, exists because the Spaniards immigrated and then mixed with the local population, and that's how we got Latinos instead of Spaniards. Not ready for that conversation, but here we are. So, this group of people, again, with Gerard Butler as Stoic the Vast, the only, I think, returning actor from both movies, because he voices that same role in the animated movies. And during this attack, are erstwhile, nerdy but intelligent, and emotionally sensitive and empathetic and emo haircutted Hiccup launches a couple of bolas at the dreaded Night Fury dragon and hits it, and it crashes into the woods. And Hiccup and his father don't really get along because one is Hank Hill and one is Bobby Hill, and I can't unsee that comparison when someone else made it. So the Vikings are ready to go out on another raid. They're looking for the nest, the big old nest where all the dragons come from, because then they will solve the world's problems. There will be no more dragons to bother them. But it's not going very well. They keep getting attacked by dragons when they sail into the mist where the dragon island is. And it's just not going great. And the island kind of sucks. So Gerard Butler rallies the troops, and they go off on another expedition. And he leaves behind a man with one arm and one leg, now played by Nick Frost. Maybe the only time I'm ever going to say Nick Frost is kind of a downgrade, because I like Nick Frost, but he's a little bit of a downgrade from Craig Ferguson, who voices that same character in the original. And he tells Nick Frost, soon to be Hagrid, train up the next group of younglings while I am gone, because winter's coming. And the Nightwalkers, and no, sorry, wrong franchise. But get them ready. And he goes, yeah, sure, I can do that. So the others go off and are here, and Hiccup and a couple and the other kids, all of whom you know if you've seen the original, all begin training. And Hiccup wanders into the forest, and he finds the dreaded Night Fury, the black dragon that he downed. But he's just so overcome with empathy for one of God's fellow creations that he can't kill it. So he lets it go, and the dragon looks at him funny, but the dragon can't fly off because one of its tail fins is damaged, and so it can't steer and stabilize properly in the air, and it's stuck in a little basin. It's a sad dragon, just laying there. Its fin starts drooping over instead of being upright. Boy, that's a deep reference that I don't know too many people are going to get, but I'm throwing it out there. And he starts to befriend this. He feeds it fish, and from this dragon, he learns the secrets of all dragon kind, because they're not diverse. You see, so it doesn't matter what they look like.
The secret of dragonkind is they behave as dogs.
They're dogs and cats, depending on the mood. But the real secret is that it doesn't matter what their biology is. They all react to eels the same way. They're all allergic to dandelion seeds.
And they're all ticklish around the chin.
They're all got a tickle spot under the chin. Yeah, they all react to, it doesn't matter if they've been in captivity and abused for years and years and years. If you just kind of do this, like Chris Pratt, and you look away, the dragon will become your friend. And so he learns the secrets of dragonkind, and he uses this to excel at training, and he runs afoul of Astrid, who is our resident girl boss. But even in the original, she's played that way intentionally, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as a characterization mark. Anyway, then Stoic comes back, and Hiccup then builds a saddle, and he repairs the damage to Toothless's tail. He calls him Toothless because his teeth are retractable. And he repairs his tail, and they start to fly together, and they become just the bestest of friends. Much like Old Yeller. That's not foreshadowing. And Hiccup now earns the right to complete the training arc by killing a dragon. But he doesn't want to kill the dragon. He wants to make friends with it and prove that humans and dragons can coexist. And it kind of works, and then it goes sideways because turns out doing that to a traumatized dragon in front of a group of people who are going to react with confusion and anger just muddies the waters. So Toothless shows up to save his bestest friend, and he gets captured. And then Hiccup and his dad yell at each other like you do. But Hiccup lets slip that the dragon can find the dragon island because he and his girlfriend took a ride on the dragon, and they found their way there eventually. He says, you don't understand. Godzilla's there. And if you go, then Godzilla will wake up and kill you, the big dragon that's kind of bullying everyone else. They're the queen dragon who lays all the dragon eggs, because we're just mixing all kinds of animals, subcultures, and...
Let me tell you how it irritated me to no end that they were calling the dragon the queen bee, and that these were all the worker bees, but then they were also they're enslaved, and if they don't do it, then the dragon will eat them. And I'm like, well, which one is it? Because queen bees don't eat the other bees.
They're mixing some of the stuff from this. They're mixing language and talking points from the second movie into this one in that respect. And yeah, it's dumb. So then the Vikings grab poor Toothless. They stick him on the boat. And as they drive into the mist, the call of the queen dragon reaches him and he starts pointing the direction to them. He is their compass. And all the kids are left behind. And Hiccup feels bad. And then he gets a pep talk. And he goes, okay, there are dragons here still. And once we befriend them, we can build saddles or something equivalent. And we will fly out after them because, you see, the Vikings are going after the queen dragon. And it's really big. And they're not going to be able to beat it. It's just going to go badly. We must go save them. So then we get to the big fight. And then eventually Hiccup and Toothless are able to defeat the queen dragon. And Hiccup loses a foot. So now he and the dragon are more bonded because they both got injuries to the lower extremities. And the people of Berk learn to live in harmony with the dragons until the sequel when the dreadlock guy shows up. But we'll get to that when we get to that in a couple of years, won't we? And that's it. That's How to Train Your Dragon.
I don't hate this movie, as I said before. I think I think, despite my and maybe even in line with my earlier assertions that it was natural and good that Universal decided to do what they did here because it worked with Disney for the longest time. But here's the thing, because I remember, Petridge Farm remembers, but I remember Robert Winfree of the Screaming Boy podcast.
Just had to do it.
When we discussed Cinderella, Aladdin, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast at all, we talked about if you're going to do one of these live action remakes, you have to do something, you have to bring something to the table that makes the exercise worthwhile. Do something with the aesthetic, add to the backstory in some way, flesh out the main story, build sets, create stunt pieces that at the time could have only been done in animation and can now be fully realized in real life to create the magic that was once Hollywood. And Beauty and the Beast largely did that.
Mm-hmm.
Cinderella absolutely did that. Aladdin did some interesting things.
The only interesting thing Aladdin did was like flesh out elements of the genie's power and how it interacts with the world.
Yeah.
Which but then, I think the more I've thought about this, and I've given this some thought, like, why did Cinderella work? What was it about that movie that none of the subsequent ones have been able to match quality-wise? And I've arrived at a couple of conclusions. One, you had the right creative people behind it, because that's directed by Kenneth Branagh, who is a serious Shakespearean actor and a very talented director. So he gets the drama. But two, if you rewatch the original animated Cinderella, boy, is that that script is about that thin.
Yeah. I have made all of those points before, and we'll make them again, but only as a TikTok done by AI video.
Yeah. They had to find things to do. And the problem starts to come in when you don't have to, when you can be lazy about it. Or, counterpoint, you get the wrong people involved, like, boy, we're going to make a Dumbo movie. Who should do this? I know, Tim Burton.
So where I was going with this was, this movie didn't do that. This movie just did a shot-for-shot remake of the cartoon and brought nothing else to this. As a matter of fact, in all actuality, this is more Lion King than it is Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast, in the sense that by doing a live action version of it, you actually accentuated its flaws. For example, Astrid works in the cartoon because in the cartoon you can have a gangly girl because you're doing something to the effect of a stylized art.
Yeah.
These characters are not drawn human-like. They are drawn stylized. So when she's gangly and spindly, but you're telling me she's the biggest, baddest Viking warrior this side of the Pecos, I'll believe you. I'm watching a fantasy. And then in real life, I'm watching this skinny-ass girl pick up an axe, which looks like it's heavier than she is, and waving it at a dragon, and I'm laughing. And when she's running after Hiccup, I'm like, ha, you run like a girl. And it's like, and I kept doing this throughout the movie. I was like, this is just reminding me that the cartoon, like, made sense to do it this way. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, like, that's the thing. If you bring me a script and you're like, it's Valerian, the city of 1,000 planets, and I'm looking at this going, if I do it live action, it's going to cost me this much money. It's going to look like this. It's going to be these limitations. If we do it as an animated feature, it'll look this way, that way, and it'll cost me that much. Which is more cost effective and which will turn out a better product. If you bring me Reservoir Dogs and I run the same calculus, I don't make the same decision unless I'm doing a lot of drugs. So I'm watching this movie.
So that's your George Lucas.
And again, CGI'd Mr. Orange bleeding everywhere. But I'm watching this and I'm like, this world doesn't feel magical in the way that the cartoon world did.
Not at
because
all.
it's not. You're trying to convince me this is a real place, but like I said during our intro, everything about this place seems as unreal as humanly possible. It seems as, fake as a $4 bill. None of this makes sense. I mean, like, I was making jokes about it because dare I fucking actually scrutinize this movie in front of my kid, but I couldn't get away from it. Did I hate the movie for that reason? No, but we're looking at the movie from a couple of different angles, and one of the angles I looked at it is I was never not reminded this is fake as bullshit. I was never not reminded this is a imitation of the cartoon. So in that sense, it fails, and in that sense, it's as good as The Lion King and sufficiently worse than Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast. This may have been my problem with the original cartoon. I don't know. I haven't watched the cartoon in a while, and I had to ask one of my kids. But I walked away from this movie, and that's the only thing I can really talk about right now, with a profound sense of, so the movie can happen. Everybody in this movie has to be incredibly stupid in order for the plot to move forward. And if anyone has a modicum of forethought before the time to have forethought comes, and he was like, but what if they had been on an arc? Don't you understand? No. They have forethought when the script tells them they have to, not because of anything that led to it. And that, again, may have been a problem with the cartoon, but since I don't remember the cartoon all that well, I assume it's probably the same. But I had a hard time staying involved in this movie, watching this many people make this many stupid decisions. The kid playing Hiccup is good for what they asked him to do. I think he's got a nice face. I think he does a good job in this role. I'll be curious to see what he does next. Outside of that, other than the known actors, nobody else in here, they were doing their best impressions of the voice work in the cartoon, and that's about it. But it also reminded me how much more believable it was in the cartoon than when I saw. There's been since the advent of VO, there've been a lot of AI videos on TikTok as of late, and one of them has been a fat, pink-haired, septum-pierced lesbian, as near as I could tell, doing police training, and and complaining about the amount of physical work it takes to be a cop, and that's all I could think about when watching the kids. Because again, my mind accepted it when it was a cartoon.
But
accepting.
when you have to look at the fat kid from Deadpool 2,
Yeah, when I look at the kid who has the body developments of the uh, body shape of a volcano,
if I may
and then
quote Scott Steiner,
he's fat.
there we go.
But the fat redheaded chick wasn't much better.
Nope.
You people would have been dead. That's the thing. You're asking me to participate and fully engage with a world that is constantly being besieged by dragons. Who are the dragons going to pick off first? The infirm?
As the old saying goes, you don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun the guy next to you.
Right. So all that would be left would be like the fittest and the fastest, not the fattest and the dumbest. They would go first. Like, I'll accept it as a cartoon. I won't accept it in real life. It's a major problem. It's a major failing of this movie.
When they made this movie, they did not sit down and actually look at, like, how do we adjust stuff that works in an animated film versus stuff that works in real life.
That's what I'm saying. This is more Lion King than Beauty and the Beast, because Lion King was like, oh, we'll just do photorealistic animals and it'll look the same, except that, guess what? Photorealistic lions don't emote.
Yeah.
It doesn't do, I just can't wait to be king.
Yeah, you don't do the jazz hands.
Right. The lion's just going, I just can't wait to be king.
You can't get the goose stepping hyenas.
No, you can't do any of those things. So this movie, it was Lizard Brain. This was produced, written, directed, and acted by Lizard Brain. And I got through it well enough, and I walked out of it, and I told the kids I liked it because here's the thing. The emotional beats still work.
Yeah, like this movie you only really struggle with this movie if you really think about it. And
watching Hiccup bond with Toothless still works. Because for the same reason the Mandalorian bonding with Grogu worked, for the same reason every time we do a boy and his dog works.
Yeah.
Because there's something about a dog's eyes and a boy's being that, still speaks to us on a very human, very basic level. So watching Hiccup do dog stuff, Toothless do dog stuff, and watching him bond with Hiccup and Hiccup, find his voice, find his courage, find his true self through bonding with this dog was all very nice stuff. The things that this movie says about the strained relationship, of which I know nothing about, between a father and his son.
Oh, you haven't been on both sides.
Not at all. To have lived the life of a son who perpetually disappoints his father and being reminded of it on an ongoing basis, I was, touched by this movie more than once, and definitely more so in the second half than in the first. The first, I was shaking my head a lot. But I think the emotional beats still work. I think if anything saves this movie, other than your emotional attachment to the source material, and by that I mean the cartoon, not the book.
Yeah.
It's that the emotional beats all are as resonant now as they were when the cartoon came out. And a boy and his dog never gets old. So that's it. I'm glad the movie's doing well. I don't want to see movies fail. I'm glad people are enjoying it and it brought joy to people. I haven't heard anything like post Lilo and Stitch. My TikTok wasn't filled with a lot of the kind of Ohana means leave your family behind kind of bullshit.
Oh, did you see the director come out and try to defend the ending?
Yes, I don't care. My point is I haven't seen that kind of visceral reaction to this, so I hope it does well. It's got a Pixar movie up next. And then
that is not trending. You've seen the tracking on that? I mean, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but
I actually haven't. I've been very immersed in what's going on with Superman and the Fantastic Four.
Okay, so Elio at the moment is tracking to like a 30 million opening weekend.
Ouch. Anyway, your thoughts on How to Train Your Dragon?
This is kind of a case study in rushing an animated movie to live action and not understanding how certain things work in one medium versus the other. Your characterization being done via silhouette in animated stuff, that carries a lot of work. Like the way you design a character when you can just design them any way you want says a lot about the character and will carry a lot of the weight for you. You don't get that as much with people. There's also dialogue beats and performance notes that work in animation because it's animated. So when you have the comically overconfident guy who's also a little bit shorter than everyone and is clearly overcompensating, you can do things with the animation and with the performance that cue us into, oh, I know you. I know what kind of character you are. Those same traits in a live human don't read the same way. Right? Bugs Bunny, if it's just a dude, ain't funny. It's an exaggerated example, but hopefully you take the point. You have to do different amounts of work to overcome that when this is what we're dealing with. And I don't think they adequately cleared that hurdle. I do want to say some positive things because, like you, I'm not mad at this movie. Like, I might have sort of philosophical objections to it because if this is all you're going to do, just re-release the original and everyone, hey, it's 15 years since the first one came out. Here it is again. Make a big push. People will go see it. You won't have to spend as much money as you did on this one, but that's a philosophical objection, and it's not entirely. It's fair to discuss, but I can only hold it against the movie so much. Astrid's a bit of a struggle for me because, again, the character design does a lot of the heavy lifting for her. The cartoon world does a lot of lifting to help make that character believable. And there's stuff you can do with cartoon animated features that are really, really hard to pull off in a human. So she just kind of comes across as insufferable more than somewhat. You root for her a lot more in the animated movie. Like, she's still a little bit of a, the character's kind of the same, but there's a lot of little things that you can do with an animated movie that make up ground that you have to do differently in live action.
So we're getting comments from people.
All
I'm
right.
going to put this one on here because I don't know how to handle it.
Do you want to?
Is it? Yeah. Is that what we're doing?
Sure.
Okay. Is that what
I
he wants?
believe so.
Is that what he likes? Is that how he likes it? Yeah.
Tell you what, buddy. If he did it right, comment again with a thumbs up. If you want him to try something different, spell it out phonetically.
I will interrupt Robert's review to take notes on how to appropriately. I mean, are we doing Howard Dean?
No one's doing how you, Mark, the only person on God's green
Howard
earth.
Dean in the year of our Lord 2025 is this guy.
Mark, 10 years ago, you were still the only guy making Howard Dean references.
Hang on.
Howard Dean references stopped in 2005 after the election.
He said moaning tone. Yeah.
He might want the like the cop, the Chief Wiggum line.
Okay, all I can think about is the comic book guy right now, of which I've been compared to on TikTok. Oh, cheeseburgers and loneliness are a dangerous mix.
That's very true. No truer words have ever been spoken by comic book guy than cheeseburgers and loneliness are dangerous together.
High-pitched femboy sound. Oh.
Okay, he's just trying to get off now.
All right, continue.
Either that or he's building a sound collection to train an AI to make noises.
Like, for my podcast, we just have this one fat ass making weird Howard Dean noises.
What he's doing is he's like going to turn it into an AI VTuber or something. That's probably what he's doing there.
All right.
Godspeed, man. I'm just razzing you. I'm not trying to say anything deliberately insulting. So, but to the same point, like, there's a bunch of stuff about the relationship between Hiccup and Stoic that gets conveyed physically in the animated movie.
Right.
There's a lot of the comedy that is physical because you do stuff with animated characters.
Actually, I wanted to mention this before, but it plays to your point that you're saying. So Hiccup is the only thing that still looks animated in this whole movie. Hiccup still looks very cartoony.
A little
Like
bit.
he looks very animated, and I do that, and I say that because the rest of the dragons still have an earthy, scaly. They look like real dragons
Sort of.
dragons feel, to the point that my kids pointed this out. They liked the monster dragon, sorry, the queen bee dragon, better in the live action than they did in the cartoon. They felt that because it looked real, it looked visceral, it looked tangible, it had greater menace than the cartoon one did, which I think is an interesting point. It kind of makes
That's
your
fair.
point for you. But like I said, Hiccup still feels a little Roger Rabbit-y to me. I keep saying Hiccup. I mean melatonin. Go on.
So the point being, like, you just lose something in translation when, like, the scene in the animated movie when Stoic and Hiccup try to have a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
like, now we finally got something to talk about. They just look at each other in silence because no, they don't. Like, that's funny in the animated movie because of some of the stuff they do physically. Like, the
Right.
eyes shift back and forth, and there's some fingers. Oh boy, what are we doing? Like, we're not quite like, yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a physical component to it that you can't do in real life, because in real life, if you behave like that with real people, it just looks wrong. And so again, you just lose some stuff like that in translation when you're going from one of these to the other. But
Hiccup, why are you behaving this way? Oh, I had a stroke.
I'd be in real trouble if I wasn't this close to being a cartoon character. One of my favorite Ernest lines, by the way, is that one. But let me say a few positive things. So the dragons look good. They had to make a choice. Like, do we make them more cartoony? Do we make them a little bit more realistic? And because we're not trying to do Who Framed Roger Rabbit here, they went with something more believable. But they all look good. Most of the interactions are fine. There's a couple that look janky, but for the most part, they look pretty good. The flying sequences bothered me because it felt like they couldn't keep the camera still. And I'd rather get a sense of wonder and majesty from, like, scope and perspective than from rapid cuts and fast
That's why my
movement.
son said they're going to take the same footage and just repurpose it for the amusement park ride.
He's probably right, for the record, about that. About that sequence in particular, he's almost certainly correct. I did not see this in 3D.
Just keep going.
So I didn't see it in 3D, but there's stuff you can tell when it's supposed to be played in 3D and others that it doesn't seem to matter. There's a few janky bits. Like, a couple of the times when there's a scene where, like, Stoic's supposed to headbutt a dragon into submission,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool in the animated movie, and in the live action doesn't quite play because you can't get the angle right because it's a real person and not a real thing. And it just doesn't quite land.
Yeah.
But positive. So dragons look pretty good. Hang
I
on.
keep drifting negative, damn it.
I do, and I'm trying not to. The music is pretty good. Yeah, the main theme
My
is just the
kids' comment
same.
on that was they kept hitting the same goddamn song. It was like Wonder Woman, like that comment. Like every time she does anything in the Zack Snyder movies, every time they play the same Wonder Woman theme. Wonder Woman's taking a piss, they have to hear. They were like because I did a TikTok of the movie poster with my kids in front of it after we'd seen the movie because I didn't have time before that. And my son was like, if I have to hear that goddamn song one more time, they played it every 5 minutes.
That's slightly exaggerated, but I understand his point.
Yeah.
They do lean into the main theme a little heavily. As you mentioned, the acting is all acceptable. Like, there's nothing here that's bad. I said, I think the only downgrade here, like legitimate downgrade, and I hate to say it about Nick Frost, but in the animated movie, Craig Ferguson voices that same character. And Craig Ferguson just brings a boatload of personality to that kind of thing.
So when the movie was over, people in my theater, there was a fair amount, it wasn't full. It was on a Sunday afternoon. People in my theater clapped and cheered.
Yeah.
I don't care. Here's what I care about. My son pulls my shirt and he goes, "Roses, Robert Winfree. They'll throw roses at the screen."
Yeah.
I can't believe, my kid has now picked that up as like a reference.
He could be making worse references.
Yeah.
I liked the final battle that we had with the Queen Dragon. I think that worked okay.
It was weird that Hiccup said, "Get away from her, you bitch." I thought that was odd.
Odder that they didn't censor it, but you know. But I thought that worked pretty well. So I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm not mad at this movie on its own terms. It's fine. It's not great, but it's not, awful. And I'm more annoyed at the circumstances that led to this movie. And I've definitely got a handful of craft issues, but like you said, the emotional beats still mostly land. The music's fine. There's things that needed to be smoothed out that weren't for whatever reason. But this is hardly the worst thing I've seen all year.
No,
not even close.
This is definitely not worse than the last two movies we saw. But
no,
for the first time, since I don't know what have I recently gushed over? Just a real quick review, because the last two things we both screamed into the wilderness, especially me.
We did Ballerina last
week. We both
week.
like Mission Impossible. We both like Final Destination. So yeah,
they're fine enough. Yeah.
Yeah, we went. Thunderbolts was like the worst show we've done all year, for a variety of reasons. But you weren't on Nana's. We both like Final Destination. So we had a 2-week run. We were doing okay. Then we had a 2-week run. We were not okay. We're back to okay again.
Yeah, and this is, on your 3-point scale, this is middle of the twos. Like, this is dead average.
And our last thing that we're going to say before we move into the money tonight is POV. Your friend's a dragon, and you say, "Hey, instead of slaying the dragon, let's ride the dragon." Eh?
Okay, I don't know if you're making a sex reference or a drug reference, because you could go either way with that one.
Well, sex reference or drug reference is the phrase that pays here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. So here comes the money.
We're in the money. We're in the money.
Yes, now. Alrighty. Nope. There we go. Ahem. Been watching The Critic lately. Ahem.
Yeah.
On a budget of 150 million Marvel monies, this thing has made 197.8 million dollars, as we said before. I think I told you last week I had to get rid of the plane crash.
You did.
Yeah, because it got dinged for copyright
somehow.
Yeah, so I gotta find a new one. But I don't necessarily also feel the need to play V for Victory either. V for Vendetta, Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, How to Train Your Dragon.
Wow, you just went through all the Alan Moore things.
It's like a bit I do with Jesse, right? Where we can't remember something, so we'll just start saying Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, V for Vendetta.
Okay.
Really? You didn't know he did that? All right. As of June 15th,
it's been a minute since I've heard you do the bit, if I've heard you do it before. So
okay. As of June 15th, 2025, How to Train Your Dragon has grossed $83.7 million in the U.S. and Canada, and $114.1 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $197.8 million. In the U.S. and Canada, the film was released alongside Materialist and was projected to gross $65 to $80 million from 4,000 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $35.6 million on its first day, including $11.1 million from preview screenings. Went on to debut $83.7 million, topping the box office and marking the best opening of the series. It was the fourth highest opening weekend of 2025 up to that point, behind a Minecraft movie, Lilo and Stitch, and Captain America: Brave New World. Yeah, can't knock the hustle. I mean, I know Robert can, but normal people can't knock the hustle. Why do they keep doing this? Because when it works really, 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 really well. Someone named Anti-Fury, Nova shut it. That stays in the DMs. Ah! And, oh my goodness. Hang on. This is what happens when we get comments. I get all verklempt. He says, fantastic. It was funny sexual reference. LOL. You're welcome. And then a new friend in here. Howdy, everyone.
Oh,
I'm Jacob.
So that was the bad dragon reference, not the opium reference. Okay.
Okay, you can read this. Read that on screen.
Okay. That's what we're doing. Howdy, everyone. I am Jacob Alexander Schwarnberger, Mr. Marston, the King Red Spy Red X. Schwarnberger, it means Schwarnwerber.
Fantastic, everybody.
We have gotten to the point where some of the AI chatbots are just spazzing out on us. And you know what? I'll take it.
How to Train Your Dragon was the #1 movie of the weekend.
To the shock of no one.
Yes, it knocked Lilo and Stitch from 1 to 2. Materialist debuted at #3 from A24. Mission Impossible dropped from 3 to 4. Ballerina, good.
Oof.
Dropped from 2 to 5 with a 60% drop.
Yeah, soft opening and a 60% drop. And yeah, that ain't good.
Speaking of DMS, dropping many suckers, yo. Karate Kid Legends from 4 to 6. Final Destination Blue Lines 5 to 7. The Phoenician Scheme 6 to 8. The Life of Chuck opened at a bunch of theaters. So
yeah, it got its wide release, and I need to find some time to watch that because I like the short story it's based on.
And Sinners, which I think is now available PVOD,
Probably
dropped 9 to 10. Other picture postcards debuting this weekend were Tatami, which debuted at #22.
You missed the Unholy Trinity, but that debuted.
Oh, 15. A Photographic Memory debuted at 35, and that was the weekend that was. Worldwide, baby. Ninja, still #1. A Minecraft movie, still #2. A Lilo and Stitch, still #3. Mission Impossible,
Hey, it got around Brave New World.
Yay! Mission Impossible's gotten to 507. Captain America,
hey,
still 450.
Man, they did this giant celebration for it crossing the $500 million mark. I'm like, guys, your budget was 400.
Yeah.
We ain't celebrating yet.
It is amazing what we've picked up from, Pravda over the years. Boy, do they know how to spin a story. Sinners is at #7.
It's all just propaganda. News. I'm convinced at this point news doesn't exist. It's just propaganda.
That is correct. News is a bunch of old guys on TikTok. That's the only place you'll see it. Final Destination is #8. Snow White still in the top 10 at #9, but not for much longer. And How to Train Your Dragon debuted at #10. Oh dear hearts. Oh, how it hurts. Dogman from February.
Was finally.
Chris Bailey knocked out of the top 10. How the mighty have fallen.
Mighty. That movie made enough money for it to be happy. And it's been just sitting there annoying you for the last 5 months.
Fall. I feel like fucking Megatron. Anyway, next week we have Elio, which you wanted to talk about that really quick.
Yeah, the tracking numbers for it early are not great. It's tracking for a 25 to 30 million opening weekend. And look, man, Pixar has done some work to try and repair their brand. They're still damaged. I'm not saying it's going to wind up being a bomb when it's all said and done, but it's at the point with Pixar where those movies have to have legs. Mm-hmm. Nobody's taking them on. They have lost their cachet to have giant weekend. Nobody's taking them at face value anymore.
Our boxes haven't shifted.
I assume because you haven't clicked the right button.
No. I'm trying to whatever. So we'll just be on the side here. Let's have fun with comments. We don't get comments very often. So we have Anti-Furry once again, feeling a bit to be racist against the red robots now. Fantastic.
To be fair, if the red just means communist, then
next 2027 How to Train Your Dragon 2 live action. Very good.
We will be reviewing it unless Mark or I decide to blow this thing up between now and then.
And this is my favorite comment of the night, and the one that's going to aggravate Robert the most. If you're reading this on your screen, talking to another male, you're in gay. Fantastic. I have now watched both seasons of The Critic, where every other episode he was telling Duke he's not gay. That was a running gag on The Critic. You ever watch The Critic?
I love The Critic.
For the billionth time, Duke, I'm not gay. And then, like, right towards the end, he got a little gay. Like,
well, it's John Lovitz. That tracks.
Yeah. Anyway, here in our totem column. Sorry. Jack Black on top, Steve below. Yes, sir.
Okay, then.
People are having fun with us tonight.
You just had to phrase it that way, didn't you?
He certainly did, Ollie. So, Pixar was starting to make a comeback. They got speaking of gay, they got all the gay shit out of the Pixar movies, and people started to come see it. Last year's, I think, number one movie, the $1 Billion Baby, was Inside Out 2. So you would think that there would be some goodwill left towards Pixar. I'm wondering why the movie about the kid who wants to be abducted by aliens isn't connecting with people.
I don't know. Couldn't tell you. Okay. So Elemental had to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
As a movie. Inside Out 2 got the benefit of, it's the sequel to Inside Out, which everyone loved.
Right. And they were introducing a character which was almost universally relatable.
Yeah. And I don't know. There's a little bit of a design philosophy going on there as well, where everything's super round and mouths are always jelly beans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people are starting to react. I mean, people started talking about that with Turning Red. And it's just kind of started to grate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Them losing Brad Bird as creative director over at Pixar was a real blow to them. And I think we're finally, the last little bit has been when that started to come home to roost.
Yeah. But I don't need, even if they kept him, given the up until November, the agenda coming out of Disney, I don't know if he would have survived. I don't know if that would have saved it.
He was kind of a bulwark against the worst of the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was good about, if you want to tell one of these stories, okay, but let's tell a good story. Like, the agenda isn't a story.
I found the button.
You found the button. Yay.
They used to do that automatically. I'm now realizing I had to do it manually, which is the lot of my life.
Automation going away. But don't wiggle your eyebrows at that.
Look, sometimes I can get someone to do it for me, and sometimes I just got to do it myself.
Just got to go sugar your own churro again, huh?
You know what's funny about that? Is the following. So I watched 2 seasons of The Critic, and I do a thing on here. You may have heard of it. I go, or I go full Popeye. Right? And these are all...
me pappy.
And these are all things to insinuate a thing. Mostly to annoy Robert.
Mostly.
Now, I do that around my kids. I go, and my son thinks it's the best thing ever, but he can't purr, which is an unfortunate thing. Speaking of disappointing your father, he just goes, it's like he wants to do it so badly. He wants to do what I'm doing, and he just goes, and I'm like, no, you're not an Hasidic Jew. It's, you got to be a little more Julie Newmar, a little less Mel Brooks. And
speaking of,
we'll get to it. And so John Lovitz character, the critic, he does the purr a bunch through it, and every time my fucking daughter hit the ceiling because he would do it, and then I would do it at her. Like John Lovitz, and I would do Lily, the cartoon character did it, so I'm gonna do it too. And then she fucking like Cowardly Lions out the front window every time. I get a no, sir. Yeah. Speaking of
pulls
which,
a Scott Pilgrim right out the window.
Cat furry in disguise, bald Jack Black strikes again. Oh, I'm Jack Black. I'm Jack Black, he says.
How did I get to be Steve then?
That's a great question. Anyway, where were we?
Well, I was gonna briefly do the, Mel Brooks announcing Spaceballs too.
Oh God, I haven't even watched like the trailer or
Oh, dude.
for that yet.
Okay, no. I almost want to bring it up now because I need your reaction to the crawl. Seriously.
I don't know if we can get away with playing it on screen because
If we're
YouTube's
reacting
weird
to it
about
and
that.
pause it, look, if we're actually reacting to it and we pause it on occasion, we'll be fine.
I think the drinker said about every 6 seconds I have to stop it.
Something in that range, give or take. So I mostly need your reaction to the crawl because they do the Star Wars crawl thing, right?
Okay, hang on. Space Balls 2 trailer.
Plus, he wears a sweatshirt when we actually get to Mel Brooks.
Sweatshirt. Yeah, I can see it.
Which I want. I would kill someone for that.
All right. I'm doing this once and then we're going into the critical review. I'm
fine with that, but I need to see. A lot of this has to do with the content of the crawl.
I heard you the first 20 times you said it. Okay, let's fucking mute that. Okay, you ready?
Full screen is probably better.
Your mother's probably better. All right, 38 years ago, there was only one Star Wars trilogy. This is very true.
Oh, if you want to mute that entirely. Prequel trilogy.
Okay, stop.
Okay, you do it. You do it. We should have.
But since then, there have been a prequel trilogy, a sequel trilogy, and a sequel to the prequel. All right. A sequel to the prequel, a prequel to the sequel, countless TV spinoffs, a movie spinoff of the TV spinoff, which is both a prequel and a sequel.
All of this is true.
Not to mention 2 Dunes, 7 Jurassic Parks, 2 Avatars, plus 3 upcoming Avatars, making 5 Avatars. Did we write this?
No. Hang on, it keeps going.
Okay, 36 MCU movies with 2 different Robert Downey Jr.'s. DCU attempt number 1, DCU attempt number 2, an animated Lion King. A live-action animated Lion King. A live-action animated Lion King prequel. Ugh, it stinks.
It did.
8 Harry Potter movies. Oy vey. A TV series remaking the same 8 Harry Potter movies.
Recently
a whole
announced.
streaming service of Star Trek. 7 Alien movies, 2 of which were also Predator movies, not to be mistaken for the 6 Predator movies that are also not Alien movies. It's all true!
Keep going.
One Prometheus, which is kind of an Alien movie, 4 Beatles movies, and an Oppenheimer. Fantastic.
Okay, pause it because it's about to get into the...
Yes.
Hang on. There is something deeply disturbing about the last 3 decades of film being expressed like that in that crawl, and not a single word of it is untrue or exaggeration. If that's not staring into the void, I don't know what is.
But in 38 years, there has only ever been one. Baseball! Where's the Spaceballs? Watch out! Is there any more to this?
A little bit.
Until now.
There we go. Now it's going to cut to Mel Brooks.
After 40 years.
First of all, he looks like the fucking Crypt Keeper.
He's looked like that for a long time, but who cares? It's Mel Brooks.
I do, because I had to sit through History of the World Part 2, and I wish he'd stop.
I have faith in this one.
We asked, what do the fans want?
For you to stop,
Hang
retire,
on.
go to Tahiti.
But instead, we're making this movie. May the Schwartz be with you.
Fantastic.
Okay. So, one, they actually really do need to subtitle it Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
But yeah, that crawl, man, I watched that, I was almost in tears. First laughing, and then I went, wait, that's all true. And then I cried for a different reason.
Well, crying for a different reason is the phrase that pays here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. So, with that said, the critical review.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Yes, now.
Yeah, that's about right.
Almost 100% of the audience clapped. Roses, Robert Winfree. They'll throw roses at the screen. I love my son.
We're at the point where Mr. Burns could release a Burns for all ages, and the audience would give it a good review on Rotten Tomatoes.
But 78% of the critics thought it was just fine. Top critics, that woof.
Oof. Oof.
Wow, that has got to be the
Wow.
first severe distinction between the critics and the shills.
I've not seen a 20+% drop before. That's a big ol' switch.
That's what she said. My God. All right, verified audience is 98. All audiences is at negligible difference.
Yeah, negligible difference.
Boy. And the AI writes, crafted with loving fidelity to the
By
animated
which you mean
classic
plagiarism.
by the original co-director Dean DeBruch. How to Train Your Dragon doesn't best the first iteration, but still reaches enchanting heights of its own. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, moderate AI.
Alrighty. Jake Wilson of Sydney Morning Herald. What's the point of going from animation to live action if not to bring the story closer to the real world?
Well, he's trying to make a legitimate point, but you don't have to bring this. The story doesn't have to become more realistic and more down to earth. It just can't be exactly the same because you're in a different medium.
Katie Walsh, Tribune News Service top critic. How to Train Your Dragon in any form remains one of our most heartening tales. Ma'am, watch something besides children's movies.
Yeah. Did you work on it? Because how is this yours?
Michael Ward of Should I See It? Its attempt at realism dulls the imaginative filmmaking that made the original so unforgettable, which is what we said.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
One of the internet's many monsters, Doug Walker of Channel Awesome. I'm
True.
surprised at how many scenes do improve on the original, but the majority is still recycled storyboards and sound bites without the fresh originality.
Partially true, yes. Hey, there's Jeff.
One of the internet's great saints, Jeffrey Harris of 401media.com.
You almost said it with a straight face.
Writer and director Dean DeBruch masterfully crafts and translates the animated film into a rousing, inspiring live-action experience that captures the magical bond between Toothless and Hiccup.
It's a bit much.
He's your friend, but I swear to God, he read that from the script that he was given.
There's a few parts in there that do feel like PR lines.
The future ex-Mrs. Robert Winfree the first, Tanya Lamb of Lola Lamb Chops. Lola Lamb Chops.
It's been so long since she's been on this segment. I kind of hoped she'd retired or died.
How to Train Your Dragon is magic and will captivate a new generations of fans. No.
Just show them the original.
You can rent it anywhere. Stream it.
Golly.
How fucking old am I? Jim Shembry of jimshembry.com. I don't know if he gets paid for this, but he gets a lot of viewers apparently.
You know what? I will dust it off because I can see his review. So you self-employed loser.
Like, yeah. Same. Dreep?
Wow. If he did get paid for that, he should flagellate himself.
I'm gonna go flagellate myself when this is over. Speaking of flagellating
You,
yourself,
Mark, you're too smart to make that joke when you know what I meant.
speaking of too smart to make a joke, Amy Nicholson of the Los Angeles Times top critic. How to
This.
Train Your Dragon, as we learn
Question mark?
as
Question mark?
as we learned back in 2010, it takes patience and fish and quite a bit of yawning. Why train your dragon again? That's harder for filmmaker Dean Dublas to answer.
I feel like this woman has not been struck with enough dead fish. So anyone who knows her, chuck a salmon at her head.
Speaking of striking people with a dead fish, Carla Hay of Culture Mix, one of the many brides of
Transition.
Robert Winfree. The unsurprising.
One of these days, I'm going to ask you an uncomfortable. I'm going to save it for after because I don't want to do it on air. But
The unsurprising live-action remake of 2010 animated film How to Train Your Dragon has engaging performances and is more visually dazzling than its animated counterpart.
no, not even close. No,
Remake falls short in personalities of the teen supporting characters. Hey, who cares
that's true.
about this? You know what I want to talk about really quick?
All right.
So Thursday kicked off Pride Month here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. Everyone settle down. And Pride also brought back the prodigal son, not the prodigal son, the prodigal son, Sean Comer, as he was been gone for a while. He came back for the Karate Kid, but this is his real, coming out party. Anyway, so we did last year's tribute to all things trans. We did Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, and we did Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which we were supposed to do last year at the height of the trans movement, but instead we're a year later, and now we're at the falling apart of the trans movement. Timing is everything.
We are consistent, if nothing else.
So my son, doe-eyed and bushy-tailed and full of innocence, asked me. He says, "Father," he called me father. He says, "Father, you and Robert Winfree have such great chemistry together, and you review so many films. Why not have him on one of the Pride shows?" And I looked at him, and the car got darker, and the clouds came overhead, and the birds stopped chirping.
Like Gandalf to Bilbo Baggins in the Fellowship of the Ring.
And I looked at him, and I said, "Son, do you want Robert Winfree doing gay stuff?" And he went, "Ah! No." I said, "Look, we have one rule on this network. One, Robert Winfree don't do black stuff and he don't do gay stuff."
That's overstated, but
he knew exactly what I meant, and he was like, "I am in agreement."
I would know exactly what you meant too. I'm just saying for the audience, that's overstated.
And he stamped it with his seal of approval. He was like, "I understand, Father. Robert doesn't do the Pride shows." And I'm like, "No, well, that'll be Sean's domain until we stop doing them." But I thought it was funny that he even asked. He was just like, "Why not have Robert on these shows?" And I'm like, "Why? Why would you do that to him?" Can you imagine 2 hours of you and Sean and me talking, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar?
Believe it or not, of the 3 movies you reviewed, To Wong Fu, I think I might be able to have a decent conversation with you guys about.
I honestly think Priscilla was the better movie, but ChatGPT even, or rather Notebook LM even disagreed with that statement. He was like, "No, your better segment was the Tu Wong Fu argument." I think mostly because Sean went into a tirade about gay characters should be played by gay actors, and I went, "Omar from The Wire," and then Sean quit the show. So I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, I would have gone off on that too. Not on your end of that. Like, this is professional pretend.
Yeah,
the whole point of acting is to be something other than yourself.
We had that conversation. Anyway, that's what I thought about when I brought up Carla Hay of Culture Mix, by the way. and your less than stellar reaction. Speaking of less than stellar, Jeremy Johns of jeremyjohns.com. It's worth checking out. Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, hang on.
You're a treasure.
I'm not going to kill him for that one because I know that's just part of his review. And that's an unfortunate pull to make him look like a bit of a buffoon. But I know that his actual review is better than that.
So,
Oh, no.
how you doing? How you doing? Grace Randolph of Beyond the
First of
Trail.
all, it's hi, how are you?
Whatever. Let me do my racisms the way I want. You do yours the way you want. How about that?
Okay. Yours is comical and colorful and online for profit.
Du Bois might deliver a shot-by-shot remake of his animated film, but he also manages to recapture the heart and soul as well.
Yeah.
Mason Thames has movie star potential, and with Toothless is a magical duo. The flying sequences are even more magical here.
No, the flying sequences are much better in the animated movie.
I'll do maybe one or two more. Let's see if I can find any more of your wives.
If you find one, send her to me. I am currently without wives.
Hannah Flint of Time Out, top critic. The old saying goes, just because you can doesn't mean you should. How to Train Your Dragon delivers the bare minimum to warrant its recreation.
That's about right.
Where's my punching bag? Oh, punching bag. Where
I
are
almost
you?
refuse to believe that he didn't review this.
While wearing a sailor suit and sucking on a lolly.
It's me, Mo, with a lolly. Come on, it's so out of character.
Speaking of sucking, Dan Merle of Dan Merle Reviews.
That's the best transition you've had all night.
That's what she said. A fantastic movie for the entire family. Solid, entertaining summer movie making. Right.
Your standards have just gone down the drain with your reputation, sir.
He is hanging on to whatever press he has by his fingernails. Brittany Murphy of Muses of Media. Well, it doesn't
Not that
sort of
Brittany Murphy.
Well, it doesn't sort of
dead.
she'd be dead. Well, it doesn't.
She's dead.
Well, it doesn't soar to the same heights as its animated counterpart. How to Train Your Dragon is still a solid live-action remake, and much better than many others released in the few years. Well,
That's okay. Hang on. In fairness, if we're just grading, like, what's the best live-action adaptation of an animated movie from the last 4 years? It's probably this one.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to say, let's work backwards. Everything is better than Snow White, including My Home Movies.
Yep.
They didn't do one last year because that was supposed to be Snow White. The year before that was, I believe, Little Mermaid, which if she's not black, it's not as bad as everyone says it is.
It's still a bad movie, but they just
it was on my
exacerbated
worst
it.
for the year for a variety of reasons.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I don't think it gets that. I should say I don't think it gets the hate that it gets.
The reaction feels there's less shelter from the criticism.
Yeah. But no, it's not a good movie. Mulan sucked. Mulan sucked
Oh
hard.
god, that was bad.
Oh boy, I still remember that review. We both hated Mustafa, but that's not really a remake of anything.
Yeah, again, Mufasa's not a remake.
What was between Mulan and Little Mermaid?
Hang on, I shall find out.
Because Mulan was 2020. Oh, 2021 was Cruella, which wasn't a remake. Yeah.
It also sucked.
So then 2022.
All right, hang on. So let's have a look here.
Are we counting the Disney Plus ones? Because those have been god awful.
No, I think we'll leave those alone.
Pinocchio.
Hang on. So Haunted Mansion, no. So Little Mermaid was 23. Peter Pan and Wendy was 23.
Oh yeah, that was Disney Plus, and it was also one of my worst movies of that year. I don't count Haunted Mansion. That's a remake of a movie that was about a ride. So we're just talking the remakes of the animated features.
Pinocchio was 22.
That was also a Disney Plus, and
but it was so bad.
Oh my god, it was earth-shatteringly bad.
Let's see. Jungle Cruise was not a remake.
Yep, that's a ride. Jungle Cruise is great, just didn't do very well.
Giant shame. That movie was much better than its returns
couldn't wait to
indicated.
release it anymore, but I think it was like day and date and also
Yeah.
2021, so we were still dealing with COVID.
Yeah, real shame. So okay, so after
So did anything
Cruella,
go into theaters in 2022? Because 2021 was Cruella, as was
okay, hang
Jungle
on.
Book.
So 2022, there's Ice Age, The Beatles, Turning Red, Cheaper by the Dozen. God, that movie drove me into.
Yes, that got you your own TikTok.
It did. Polar Bear, Chippendale, Hollywood Stargirl, Lightyear, Rise, Pinocchio. I think Pinocchio was the one for 22.
Right. Okay, so they didn't do anything in theaters that year.
No, they were still figuring that stuff out.
Right.
Because
So
then
then Little
23 we
Mermaid.
get
Go ahead.
23 we get Peter Pan and Wendy and the Little Mermaid.
Yeah. So my point is, if you're just talking in theater and the Disney Princess remakes, it's Mulan, technically Cruella, skip a year, Little Mermaid, skip a year, Snow White, and yes, it's all been garbage.
Yeah, it's just not good.
All right, well, folks, it's all been garbage is our phrase to pace here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. So that is
We are nothing if not honest.
or consistent. Yesterday, speaking of consistent, myself and Jesse Starcher did a live source material, of which will get cut up into 3 episodes sometime in the near future. We talked Darth Vader. I made Jesse read all 4 books plus Vader down, making 5 books total and 30 issues. He's never forgiven me. But
Nor should he.
That was a fun show, though. Tomorrow, I'm going to do karaoke. I might reprise my rendition of Megadeth's Symphony of Destruction. However, Wednesday, speaking of destruction, will be myself and Alexis and Jesse. We will be talking The Critics Season 1 and Season 2, which you may have picked up from my constantly bringing it up this show. On Thursday, Pride Month continues here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, but we have to behave ourselves because the old man is back. Yes, sir. Matt Kettner is showing up to talk the Wachowski sisters. We're reviewing Bound, which I watched today, actually. Cloud Atlas, and because I am a glutton for punishment, ladies, Jupiter Ascending. Oy.
You're talking Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending on the same show.
Yes, sir.
You don't drink enough for that.
Speaking of drinking too much, myself and Evan Bevins will be doing a comic strip for the Steven Spielberg movie that was adapted from a comic book here, which was an interesting experiment. Next week, Sunday, source material will be back, and I'm doing an extra source material, and we're talking All-Star Superman, which is the basis for the new James Gunn Superman movie.
Allegedly.
A week from tonight is Elio. Nothing on Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm taking my kids to go see Clutch, and then we close out Pride Month, myself and Sean, talking Milk, Kinsey, and Lizzie.
The amount of pedophiles you'll be discussing is shockingly high there.
Speaking of which, myself and Jesse will be doing a sessions on a special Friday night show. We're going to turn one of our funnier source material gag reels into a dubstep song.
Okay.
Yes. Hit it, Darren.
Ooh. I hate dubstep, so you know what? God bless.
You always like our session shows. I'll be curious to see if you pay attention to this one.
It's dubstep. The answer's no, because dubstep.
Okay. Well, that's what we'll be doing.
But poor Jesse, going from his Florida Man song, which is so good.
Yep. This was partially his idea. We both agreed on this, so this isn't just me running the railroad.
You guys you're the ones who have to have the creative marriage. Like, my distaste for that genre aside, I hope you guys have a good time.
What else would you do with Hit It, Darren? Do you remember Hit It, Darren, from our Ant-Man Second Chance Man review?
Not really.
Okay, well, it spawned the LGBTQ Hulk thing, which was actually Darren Cross, but he was a big pink monster. So I was like, why is the Hulk LGBTQ? Because he's pink, get it? And then Jesse blurted out, "Hit it, Darren," and Ronnie ran into the woods to live deliberately. That's how that show went. What else would you do with that story other than turn it into a dubstep song?
I would go. It's one of those songs that would have to be ironic for those of us who know the story. I'd turn it into like dark country.
Okay.
Have you heard dark country? Like the genre?
Yes.
Yeah, like that's what I do with so it sounds like this super ominous story as the lyrics play out and whatnot, and we all know it's just
It feels a little too deliverance for me. All right, speaking of a little too deliverance,
I
Robert
didn't
Winfree,
say
do your plugs.
bluegrass.
All right, do your plugs.
If you're done air banjoing.
I kind of went all over the place.
You did. Like that turned into raving almost. With your little like knit gloves and the LED lights in the fingertips.
I once went dancing a little ways back. By a little ways, I mean over 20 years ago. And I was wearing a St. Louis Blues hockey jersey, and I was wearing like Dickie skater pants with like lots of pockets in them.
Mhm.
And it was like 80s night at the club that I would go dancing to on Strong Island, New York. And I had a bottle of water in my hand because I was like fat and sweating. And somebody rolled up to me. He was like, "Hey, I see you're wearing a hockey jersey and skater pants. You carrying? You holding?" And I went in my, innocent Christian Jewish voice, "Sir, holding what? This bottle of water?" And he went, "Ugh. No, dumbass. You got any ecstasy? You clearly are someone that rolls." And I went, "I do no such thing." He's like, "Well, you certainly dress that way." I go, "Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know this was the uniform for people who use ecstasy."
I didn't know what culture I was appropriating when I put this particular uniform on.
I just like.
Turns out it was the drug dealers.
Yes, I would later learn. All right, speaking of drug dealers, do your plugs.
That's a bad transition.
That's
All
what
right.
she said.
I cover mixed martial arts and professional wrestling over at 411mania.com. WWE SmackDown on Fridays, UFC events on Saturdays. This last Saturday was UFC on ESPN 69.
Woo!
Well, the appropriate response is nice, but okay.
Okay.
As I get
Hubba
my camera
hubba.
to
Okay.
yeah, keep going. It was not a very good card. I felt bad by the end of it. Some really good stuff early, and then we had a stretch of fights that had me, to use Mark's phrase, wanting to walk into the woods to live deliberately.
It's not my friend, Henry David Thoreau's.
It was so bad. I actually have more hope for this coming card. So this coming Saturday will be UFC on ABC 8. Its prelims start at noon Eastern. They're in Baku, Azerbaijan, because the Azerbaijani government threw them a boatload of money to host an event. And who cares if Baku is shockingly close to the border of Iran? Not like there's a war going on there or anything. There's a war. I don't know what else to tell you.
They were told not to enrich their uranium. Israel said you're never getting a bomb. Never, not never.
Look, I'm not making a stance on whether or not I think they should be bombed into the Stone Age, more or less. Or at least the regime bombed into the Stone Age, because, I don't have a whole lot of love for the Ayatollah regime that took over in the 70s. I have very little love for them.
The Ayatollah of rock and roller.
Now you brought up the worst thing that came out of.
All right,
God,
keep going. I gotta pee.
You do. So yeah, I'll be covering that Saturday morning / early afternoon over on Saturday. If you want to hear a full review and preview and whatnot and my picks for any given event, I host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, which goes live. I record Sunday evening, so Monday morning you can listen to me on your way to work as I talk about the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts and associated news like BJ Penn getting arrested again.
Oh.
Man, I'm not kidding when I say he's close to pulling a Benoit, and I am not happy to say that. That man desperately needs help.
Yikes.
He thinks the people around him are imposters planted by the CIA.
You've told me this, yes.
He's now been ordered to vacate his house because he shares it with his family, and he thinks they're imposters. So there's a judge that ordered him out. Like, you have to respect the restraining order. The man needs to be in a facility, or this is going to end real bad real fast. And that's a downer note, but there's a lot of brain trauma there. So hear me talk about stuff like that. It's a great time. And yeah, we'll talk Elio next week, and Mark and I will discuss the portrayal of neurodivergence in media, because Elio's apparently supposed to be autistic. of
Oh,
some variety.
good.
He's somewhere on the spectrum. He makes up his own language.
Great.
He's a precocious child who just doesn't quite fit in and wants to go to a magical world where everything does make sense for him. And this is the you wanted to know why this movie isn't pre-selling well? That face you made right there when I just went over some of the clips. That's why.
Oh, this is going to be a long weekend. All right. Well, folks, this is going to be
I'm
a
sure
long
your
weekend.
daughter will love Elio.
This is going to be a long weekend. Yeah. I may have to leave before the movie's over to avoid having to talk to my daughter. And avoiding talking to your daughter as a father is the phrase that pays here on the Radulich.
It's not like Father's Day was Sunday was yesterday or anything.
I don't want to talk about it. Be well, be safe, and behave.